Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We're going to have a great night planned for you. For those who might have seen a couple seconds of our first little broadcast there, Brian Cardillo came in and just shat the bed. Just shat it completely. Was 10 minutes late. He was not...
It's because I was shitting the bed.
He was not repentant about it at all. In fact, he gave us a couple of pistol winks that he did it on purpose. And, we've just got to move forward. That's all that we can do. We do have a great show lined up for you. Luckily, we're going to have a lot of fun tonight. We've got Omar Mora. He's a comic book creator. He's going to be talking about some of his projects with us tonight. We're going to have a great time, especially since I am also a huge comic book fan myself. As always, you're listening to Night Terrors Radio, the fastest hour on the internet. Happy Thursday, everyone. Hope everyone had themselves a great week. I am back after a bout with the Rona, if you will. Luckily, you know what they say is absolutely no rest for the wicked. 36 hours. That was it. I blew through the Rona.
Good job, man.
In the story of man versus Rona, man won. Brian Cardillo.
I've avoided it.
I'd avoided it for 2 years, and we were, celebrating the 4th, which was a really small gathering. There were only 6 of us. One of the 6, however, had the Rona. And
I'm wondering. I think I'm just extremely fortunate with an immune system that's kind of crazy. I have been around so many people that have, messaged me a day or two later, "Hey, I tested positive," and I'm like, okay, I feel good. So, and I get to get my 4th shot in about a month because I turned 50.
You are old as fuck, Brian.
I know. So I turned 50. So if there is a positive about turning 50, it's that you get another jab.
What's strange is that I normally don't sit around thinking about how old people are. I don't care about it. But twice in the last week, I woke up in the middle of the night and I thought to myself, fuck, Brian's old. And I don't know where that came from. Do you know where that came from, Brian? Because normally I don't care.
I think it's Rob, actually, because he's older and he's trying to, I know he's not on tonight, but he's trying to, influence you a little bit there.
Well, even though Rob is obviously out with an injury, we don't usually give nicknames, but I feel as though Rob is now Das Boot. It's a very great artistic expression of a film, and I think Rob would honor it with his current foot dilemma. So Rob is now Das
even
Boot.
though it means the boat, we're going with the boot.
I can't help it. I'm gonna go with the Canadian interpretation of Das Boot.
Okay, we'll go with the Canadians.
Which means what's that about?
They're way more fun. What's that about?
Right? Doesn't Das Boot and French Canadian what's that about?
It is.
So we've got a great show lined up. We are so lucky to have our guest Omar Mora on tonight. Thank you so much, Omar, by the way, for putting up with this.
Thank you guys for having me here.
You along with an ex-wife and a bunch of girls that I dated in college are going to get a laminated union card for spending 40 minutes with me.
Then I'm looking forward to talk to you guys.
By the way, the women did not get the full 40 minutes. As many will attest. So what we usually do is, and we've sort of inducted Omar here into our little game of talking about a couple news segments. So we're going to play a little fast and loose tonight since we were a little bit late. We're going to go with one news segment, but this is one that I really, really like. I think this is great that I actually saw this today. So without further ado, let's get into a little bit of the news. We trick everyone on the internet into thinking that we actually know what we're doing with the production value we have for the show. They see our interstitials, they hear this fantastic audio and they're like, these guys know what they're doing. 10 minutes later, all that is dispelled. All of it's absolutely dispelled. So I've got to do a segment. This I thought was absolutely great because sometimes I think we hold the past with too much reverence. Like when we look at ancient history, we look at the pyramids, we look at Alexander the Great, we look at these very fantastic epochs of time, and we sort of hold them in such high esteem that what we don't realize is we were all fuck offs from the very beginning. And here is testament to that. A marble slab in storage turned out to be an ancient Greek yearbook. I think this is incredible. Like, there's no testament to a lineage of kings or anything. It literally is just a yearbook.
Does it have does it have like senior superlatives and stuff in it?
It's got a picture of a guy and somebody signed his cast.
Nice.
So researchers in the United Kingdom have found that an ancient Greek inscription on a 2,000-year-old marble tablet is actually something resembling a yearbook for a graduating class. The inscription sat in the National Museum's Scotland collection for over 130 years without being properly looked at until researchers discovered the document. So this is one of a small number of inscriptions in Scotland, one of 3 ancient Athenian inscriptions in the city of Edinburgh. It's absolutely exciting. However, it's nothing more than a yearbook. I can't get enough of the story. Like, I absolutely love this story because everyone thinks like it's the directions to the Stargate. This is it's ancient aliens. It's a yearbook. And I think that's so human. Like, we don't get enough ancient stories that are human in nature, right? Like, we don't get it. But I can imagine like a graduating class sitting there. Now, mind you, like, there's no printing press, there's no old Xerox machines. They carved this shit out of stone tablets. But you know that there were 18 kids sitting there going, my parents paid for a yearbook.
Yeah, hurry up.
They never thought I'd graduate. They paid for the yearbook.
Now, is that how you signed each other's yearbooks? You had to like chisel your name into it?
Right.
I'll bet you the philosophy club was kick-ass, though.
Oh, I can only guess somewhere on the stone tablet is a drawing of a penis. You know
it. Yeah.
There's no way it could have got unscathed without some kind of profane, obscene drawing in it. But yeah, so they referred to this as a concise class book and list the names of young men who finished their year-long civic and military training. And it had 31 names on it, such as Theogenes, Diogenes, Dionysus, which I think was a pretty popular name back then, right? Dionysus. And Dionysiodorus, which apparently had really tiny little arms. They were using their shortened names, which was unusual. So they were actually using their nicknames. Like, this 2,000-year-old yearbook actually had these kids' nicknames in it. Like,
so they have it on the museum. Like, what was the story about? Sometimes they have like a little story. This was I don't know what. Like, what do they wrote on the museum?
Well, apparently, like, they didn't know what it was. Like, they didn't take time to research it. Like, it had been sitting there for the longest time. What I think is hilarious is, at least one scholar came in there, right? And was looking by it and was like, holy shit, it's a yearbook. And then just didn't tell anybody. But they knew, they just didn't tell anybody. So yeah.
Let them think what they want.
But what's great is that they're saying that they don't use that, a lot of these accounts of ancient history are subjected, but they're subjected from a different standpoint. It's people trying to write history, like it's or I mean, I think weren't there enough scrolls about pirates or something in ancient Egypt that stretched to the moon because they were such astute accountants? Like, didn't they have like a lot of grain and stuff that was accounted for? So we know that there was stuff that wasn't like mind blowing, right? But just the idea that just sitting there the entire time was basically just like class of 02 for like years and years and years, and nobody knew it. So that was the news. That was the news we're going to have tonight. I just thought it was a great news story. Again, I love these moments that show us it doesn't matter how many thousands of years ago it was. We are still so very, very human. And I think that this story is such evidence of that. A 2,000-year-old yearbook. Like, I think this is great. Like,
I think,
unfortunately, our paper yearbook's not going to last that long.
I
No.
think that's, yeah, yeah.
But
Who
this
knows
one definitely.
who knows how many of the manuscripts from the Sumerian civilization, who knows how many of them were like something like this.
Right. Yeah. That's what they never show you. You're watching Discovery Channel late at night and they're like, we think this has a picture of an ancient helicopter on it. We think this one is a plaque for the men's restroom. Like, they never go to the obvious, because they had to have had stuff like that, right? Like, I mean, they couldn't have gone their entire lives just writing all of this stuff that was, these mind-blowing accounts of huge, historic benchmarks. It had to have been something as simple as, like, here's somebody's divorce decree.
Sure. I mean, my
Half,
favorite thing,
53% of the documents were divorce decrees, by the way.
I mean, I spent on my 40th birthday. I know I'm turning 50 soon, but on my 40th birthday, I spent it actually on the day of my 40th walking through Pompeii.
Ooh.
And it was like the greatest day. I've always wanted to go there. But the most fascinating thing that I found in the city was when they showed us the brothel. not
Right?
lying. Like, it was like going to a McDonald's. Like, you think of Pompeii and you see, like, the people frozen in time and and all that stuff and the frescoes. Well, this was like a booth, and up on top there were frescoes of different things you could do. And so you were like, I'll take the number 1 and the number 3, and you paid and you went upstairs. Like, can you
I've got good
that for me?
I've got good money riding, Brian, on the fact that at least one of those was still called a Big Mac.
Oh, I hope so. I hope so.
So we've got a lot to get through tonight. I definitely want to have some conversation here with Omar. So, by the way, Omar, I can't thank you enough for being on. I'm actually a huge fan of comic books. I've been from a very, very early age. I love meeting people who not only in the industry, but people who obviously love the medium. And I think I can tell from looking at your office that you also love the medium.
I love comic books. I think the thing that I love about most comic books is the art, the artists. Like, I'm a huge fan of, I'm trying to get as much as original art I can get from comic books, because it's just, I think it's a beautiful medium and art.
Well, the Alex Ross stuff is always, I mean, it is timeless. His stuff to me, it's timeless. Like, it ages well. You look at stuff from different eras of book, especially from like the 70s into the 80s and then the 90s, and you always look and go, okay, that was a style that was heavily influenced by these guys who were, big in the industry. And then you look at Ross's stuff, you're just like, God, it's beautiful. Like, it's just beautiful work.
It doesn't matter. I think you just hit the point. It doesn't matter what, if it, like, the time, it just is always ageless. Like, it just has something about, I don't know, the realistic type of art. What's the name of this very famous realistic painter? I forgot his name. Huge, not comic book art. Anyway, he's like the like, I forgot the name of this guy, but the art of Alex Ross he's my favorite artist of all.
So I know, like, the moment where a huge portion of like my soul went to the comic book gods. So, like, give me an idea of when was really like the first time that you got the bug. Like, you were looking at a book, you're just like, this is never not going to be a part of me.
I think since a kid, you watch cartoon, you watch Super Friends back in the 80s, you watch all these Thundercats, He-Man, all these cartoons, and then that's when I started discovering the comics, DC and Marvel. Mostly I'm a DC guy, but then when you grow up, you kind of forget about them. At least I forgot about them. I have a lot of friends that he's still collecting since he's a child. He probably have a mind of so many comics with high values in his house, and then I forgot about it. And then the last 10 years I went back to comics, and the nostalgia of the comics, and start reading again those comics and those books, it just I've been hooked for the last 10 years, like really, really, really into it. I have comics since when, as I was a kid, but now I think I appreciate more the art and the storytelling of the books, of the comic books, to be honest.
Yeah, you do hit this sort of like line of division, where the stories mean one thing to you. Especially like when you're reading as a kid, the idea that you've got something episodic, as a serial story, like, when you're in school, you're not really faced with that kind of a medium. Most of the books you're given are books that are one-shot books. We're going to read this as a classic book, or even, reading a textbook. This is stuff that, again, is not presented in episodic fashion. And so when you're a kid and you get a comic book, you're like, what? There's another one? And then another one? And you sort of grow with it, and you sort of grow with these characters. And I was the same way. I hit a point where, I was collecting, and then I didn't collect for a little while. And then when I came back to it, it just represented something completely different to me when I finally came back to it. So so you say you're a DC guy.
Yep.
I
grew up with DC, I love Marvel. I always love Marvel. I think Marvel, the cinematic universe, when, everything started with Iron Man, it's, when people start knowing about this type of, I don't want to call it B or C characters, but they were not, the main characters of Marvel. But then it's a huge explosion of it. So that's when I get into comics on Marvel again. But DC, I've always been like a DC fan.
I'm a big Batman guy. In fact, my son, who actually just turned 10 the day before yesterday, his name is Grayson Quinn. So that's sort of my homage to two of my favorite Batman characters there. I'm a huge Nightwing guy too, so
that's
had to give him the first name of Grayson. So yeah, I've obviously established myself as an enormous nerd, Omar. But so when you came back into comics, did you also think that? Well, everything that I see back there now, is that up in the upper right? Is that a Lion-O?
Yep. That is a Lion-O. That's an original art. I forgot. I bought it in San Diego Comic-Con maybe 4 years ago.
It's like every time we get people who have interesting backgrounds on the show, like there goes my focus. Because I'm like, I think I know what that is. And there's the Alex Ross Man of Steel. There's that. And I sort of just pick apart everybody's background. Because with comic books, like there's so much to take in. It's that medium where it's a feast for the eyes, especially when you get into the actual sequential artwork. Open the cover and there's so much to look at. Now, it's also overwhelming. I remember, being in college and a couple guys were like, "Hey, we should make a comic book." That was something that, my friends and I had passed around for a while. Like, hey, we needed to make a comic book. So when you got back into books, back in comics specifically, what was that point where you like, okay, now I want to get in the industry. This is what I want to do. So tell us about the evolution of that. I'm curious.
Yeah, so basically I started, I'm in the entertainment industry. I started as an actor. I'm still acting, and that's kind of what my passion is, acting and writing. And comic book is another medium to tell a story. And as a fan, like you said, like sequentials art, especially when you follow artists, like big artists like, I don't know, Jim Lee or Tony Daniel, or so many huge artists that has such beautiful sequential pages, you just draw to that, and they tell you a story that you can't deny it. So for me, when I start telling stories, I say, you know what, I want to get into comic book. I'm doing films as well. I'm trying to develop TV series, live action, but comic book is a way to introduce your story to the world in a beautiful way. And I've been lucky to have good artists working with me that it just present the story as beautiful as I imagine. So definitely the driven to tell the story, it was get me into comic book as a writer and a creator, just to tell my own story through that medium.
And people, I think, sometimes think it's an easier medium to get into than it is, but as an artist, we're dealing with 23, 26 pages a month. As a writer, you're scheduling out stories that are arcs and upwards of a year. I mean, this is not easy writing.
It's not easy, especially for comic book, artists and writers. In my case, I wanted to finish the whole. For example, my first comic book is called The Inertians. It was a 12 issues comic books maxi series. So for me, because I know the finances, it's expensive to make comic books. It's not cheap. So I wanted to finish writing the whole 12 chapters before hire the artist and the colorist, because I didn't want to be without money on issue after issue number 3. A
Yeah.
lot of people, because I know how hard it is, a lot of people put a Kickstarter campaign to do issue number 1 and 2, but then after that they don't have more money to keep going for the series. And I mean, that's is the way for indie creators are. So after I finished my 12 issues, then it was okay, I need to find the finances before even contacting the artist and the colorist and the letterer. So I did it like a step by step. So it took me almost 2 years just to start working to send it to
Mm.
the artist. And then the artist took like another year. So if I was like almost 3 years just to finish my series of the Inertians, my first comic book series, and a lot of work went into it.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about what that first series is about?
The Inertian is about two best friends that, I mean, seeing the introduction, I pray you guys are related. Two best friends got abducted by aliens, but the thing is, the aliens didn't know that they're vampires. Like they didn't abduct humans; they abduct vampires. So once in the spaceship, it's mayhem up there. But I mean, it has more story about two best friends, how they become vampires and this journey. And then the vampires, when they discover that the alien has a dark agenda for Earth and the universe, so they try to save the day. But it's a pretty cool story. The Inertian was top 10 indie comics on LA Comic Con 2019, so that was pretty cool. And right now I got an representation for the IP, the intellectual property, to develop as a live action series. So we're working on that now.
Oh wow! Congratulations.
Yeah. I mean,
And,
still
and
a lot of movement needs to happen to make it happen because it's expensive, but we're working on it.
there's a lot of moving parts. There's a
Yeah.
lot of moving parts there for each of those particular industries, for both comic books and then speaking for myself as a filmmaker, making film is a lot of moving parts. A
A,
lot.
a lot. I finished my last film last year. We ended getting into VOD, but it's so hard to make anything that is indie
Oh
comics,
yeah.
indie films. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I've been in the quality control phase with my distributor now for the last month. So it's been a lot of learning a lot of new stuff that I never thought that I would have to learn to get it
Mhm.
ready for for streaming and AVOD and stuff. And it's a process. It's a very very
Mhm.
long process. So speaking of processes, you've got the story that you want to get out. What were some of the first things you did, especially being familiar with comics? That's an undertaking. Thinking of laying out 12 issues. So what was your process there? How did you go about that?
So basically, I'm a filmmaker, writer. So writing a comic book is a totally different medium, and the script is different than writing a film script. So I did a lot of workshops for comic books. I went to Star Wars Celebration. I don't know if you know that convention.
Mm-hmm.
So Star Wars Celebration back in 2016, 17, they had a comic. They have like a 4 days of workshops to write comic books. So that was kind of my school. I was reading before, doing like indie workshops online, but then on Star Wars Celebration, I went to all those workshops, and it was like 2 3 hours per day. So it was like a little intense course to write comics. Took a lot of notes, talked to the teachers that they were teaching comic books, and that's when I started learning about it. I started I just start writing the script for the first issue, send it to an editor, and we back and forth until you just get the pace. After I did the first two, then it was easier for me to finish the 12. But it took me like a year just to finish the 12 issues.
It's a lot of work. I
Yeah.
mean, and again, I can't impress upon our audience just how much work it is. I've known a lot of people that have been in and out of the industry for a few years, and there's a lot of late nights.
Yep.
And there's a lot of more than your 40-hour week work schedules present there.
Exactly. And we worked doing other stuff. So it's not like I'm doing, all day sitting writing comics. So I need, to make a living. So it's even harder, makes it harder to spend the time.
So the great thing about right now is, I mean, because we're all relatively people who understand the 80s, to understand how big the comic book boom was in the 80s and the 90s. What I find fascinating is the entertainment that we're seeing now, and I'm talking about big platform streaming, theatrical films. I never in a million years thought we would get to see the comic book properties that we're seeing now.
We are living in the golden age of comic books making into movies. And then you have the streamers like the Umbrella Academy, and you have all these Netflix show. You have Disney Plus with all these stories, this I don't know, secondary or tertiary character for Marvel. Hopefully DC gets their act together and give us some content. And then you have Amazon with Invincible. I mean, there's so much out there with really really good quality of it, and not mentioning the films, of course. The MCU, I think, is one of the most brilliant things I ever seen in the history of cinema. Like it or not, you're a comic book fan or not, or all these big directors saying this about Marvel or whatever, what Kevin Feige is done for the Marvel IP is incredible. Not even Star Wars is able to recreate those 10-12 years of this connecting universe the way is being done right now, and what he's doing. I think it's just magical.
I agree.
When you look at the difficulty of taking one property, just one, or whether it be the Avengers, or whether it be Guardians of the Galaxy, or whether it be some of the standalones, Captain America. When you look at just how much goes into translating one of these for film, and then the interconnectivity of the cinematic universe, it's a near impossibility. How this all came together is literally it's a miracle. It's a miracle that all of this came together the way that it did, because there's more opportunities for it to have failed
Yes.
than there were for it to succeed. But man, it was just a perfect storm.
I mean, think about it. There's no franchise that have passed like 3 movies without any trouble. Not even Star Wars when they started in the prequels. Not even mentioning the sequels. The most trilogies are very successful, but when they go after like the 4th or the 5th, something happened. Marvel has been like hitting how many movies, like those last 15 minutes of Endgames, I
Oh,
think it's one of the most magical thing on movie makers. Took 10 years in the making for people to feel what they felt in the theater for that last 15 minutes of Endgame, and that's almost impossible. I don't think they can. I don't know what's gonna be the next Avengers or Secret Wars, whatever those in the future. I don't know if they can recreate that again, because it's like you said, it's almost a miracle.
We saw so many iconic characters, and the way that they had built each of their backstories and the way that they had connected them was done with such reverence and such attention to character, that when we finally did get to those, again, you're talking about those last 15-20 minutes, I mean, that was just golden. I never thought when I was a kid in a million years that I would have ever seen that. And I'm sitting there as an adult, and I gotta admit, those last 15-20 minutes, couple of tears,
oh yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
I became a kid again, and I think that I don't know if you feel the same way, Omar, but I think that's one reason that I love having comics around me is because that sensation I had when I was younger, this sensation of looking at an alien world or, seeing a hero that was willing to fight for the underdog. You don't feel that, as you get older, you get a little more cynical. But looking back on, what I loved as a kid, and then even reading comics now, I get that feeling still.
That's the beauty of science fiction and comic books and all these fantasy stories. They're ageless. I mean, you think about stories like when you saw it as a kid, like the never ending story or Labyrinth, or you go into all these fantastical movies, you still remember because the emotion that created in you for 20, 30, 40 years. And then even the Goonies and Indiana Jones and these adventures movies is just fantastical because I mean, the world we live in, there's so many issues that when you go into this theater to see this type of movies, it just transports you. And also, most of those movies has a positive message, so you kind of identify with them. So I think that's the genre of fantasy and comic book stories is just they're ageless. And I mean, no matter what, we all have this journey in life, no matter what age we are, that we're living, that we're trying to succeed, we're trying to be our best self, we try to be heroes of our own life, for our kids, for our wife or girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. It never goes away, and that's why I feel like we can relate it to these movies.
And one thing that I will say, growing up and having these role models, looking at even the anti-heroes, even looking at characters like Wolverine, and in some sense, Batman is an anti-hero as well. Looking at heroes and anti-heroes, I think that I had a sort of different moral compass as a kid than some other kids, because I was always holding myself to this weird standard, because I was always thinking, this is not what Superman or Clark Kent would do. This is not what this character would do, or this. It probably gave me a whole hell of a lot of guilt.
Yeah.
I mean, I might as well have had like a Jewish mother just sitting there biting her fist at some of the decisions I was making. But like, I think that it did. I think it provided me with this moral compass that I might not have had as a kid. I was hoping that I would still make the same good decisions, but the morality tales in every 23 to 32 page comic book set the standard for me when I was a kid. Do you think the movies are doing that for today's youth too, Omar?
Of course, of course. There's so few things that can change a person's perception, and art is one of them. Painting, comic books, art, movies, especially because movies implement so many senses to you: visual, sound. I don't know, the music of it. It does, and I think hopefully they get influenced in the positive way, like you said. It doesn't matter what characters you are, the heroes or the anti-heroes. I mean, hopefully not the villains, but even some villains has a great arc. I don't know if you saw Thor. um,
Yeah,
the character of Gore at the end was so, he redeemed himself, with his last wish. I don't want to spoil.
but he
Sorry,
was he was
but
sympathetic, and I think comic books have that ability to create sympathetic villains
yeah,
that are multifaceted characters. I always was I was a guy that both loved and hated Lex Luthor. That was another guy that it was like,
yeah, yeah.
he was this, sometimes he could be this atrocious monster, and then other times you're like, he did give about $30 million to charity. It was probably for the wrong reason, but at least he did it. Now, I'm curious, Brian, because Brian is an educator, and we're talking about comics and art reflecting the moral compass of the youth.
Yeah.
Do you have any commentary on that, Brian?
I mean, the thing about, like the Marvel, the MCU, and like all these different series that are on that are available to everybody is the age groups that it spans. I mean, you've got people in their 50s, 60s down to my students in their early to late teens, and everybody's watching all of this stuff, and so in terms of like, the moral compass, things like that, I'm not sure. I know we get into, we will get into discussions and arguments over, which ones are better, the decisions that the filmmakers made, the, script writers made, how the,
but it's bringing
process
generations together, right, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the fact that it gives, I mean, I've always been kind of a kid at heart, but I mean, the fact that it gives like pretty much every teacher I work with, something to connect with the kids with, right? It's that medium that just kind of binds you. It's just another one of those things that just helps to bring the worlds together of us old folk and the kids. So it's fascinating. It's amazing how it's exploded and the popularity and it's the fact that it just keeps going.
Yeah.
It just keeps going. When did Iron Man come out?
Whoa, 8 or 9, 2008?
I think it was around there, right? So yeah, we're talking 14 years.
I think so, yeah, because Endgame was like the 10 years.
Right. Endgame was 10. So yeah, 14 years after Iron Man and we're still going strong.
May 2nd, 2008.
Okay.
Was and some people even look back at Blade actually being the first real representation of the new comic book era.
Yeah.
As far as movies were concerned, it definitely opened up the gates. I mean, I don't think we would have had Fox's X-Men if it were not for Blade. I think people saw the success of Blade.
Well, I mean, you got to go back to Christopher Reeve.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. He's
got to go back to Superman.
Yeah.
And, I mean, as that movie is a huge part of my childhood.
I mean, Superman is the character that is I mean, started all, and like Kevin Feige said, like he based the beginning of his movie with that arc of the Superman arc, and Superman comic books and even Christopher Reeve movies for me is what started everything for Marvel and DC and everybody in between.
Yeah, and then you had the Tim Burton Batmans, Michael Keaton, and and sometimes I wish that DC could still make movies like those.
Yeah,
they kind of struggle.
Hopefully, they get their active with the new directors, whatever.
But as much as they've struggled with their movies, their TV shows have been fantastic.
Which ones?
At least in my opinion.
On the CW?
Yeah. I think those were great. I thought the Flash, Arrow, I thought those were great.
Yeah. I loved Peacemaker, even though that's obviously
Peacemaker was awesome.
Yes.
Peacemaker was
I had so much fun with Peacemaker. So I want to take a moment and let's talk about the new project, Omar. So we've talked about the original 12 issues, and I think, by the way, I love this concept. I love high concept stuff. The idea of vampires getting abducted by aliens, to me, I think is great. So already you've sold me on that. So let's talk about your new project for a couple moments.
So Ancient Explorers, that's an interesting project because I wrote it a long time ago as a kind of a novel, put it out there, no big. That was kind of my introduction to start writing. But I always wanted that story to be a comic book, a graphic novel. So when I started writing it as a comic book, COVID hit. That was after the Inertians. And when COVID hits, a lot of I needed to look back at a lot of finances, what makes sense or not. Because again, making a full graphic novel is expensive. It's between $100 to $200 per page to pay the artists and the penciler, colorist, and letterer. So I decided to do it as a hybrid novel and comic book. But then the whole design of the book is going to be as a comic book. So the text page is encapsulated in art that the designer did that is the trim is like a comic book trim and design, and then we have the
Okay.
comic book pages in between. So basically, the story is about two best friends. They grew up together listening to Marx, is one of the character grandpas, tell a story about these hidden treasures and monsters, about this is a real legend of Peru. It's called Paititi. I don't know if you guys heard about this.
No, I'm not familiar with it.
Mm-mm.
So Paititi is a legend of Peru. It's like kind of the lost city of Peru, almost like the legends of El Dorado or
Okay.
those lost type of civilizations. And they basically they grew up, they forgot the story, all this story. They got cynical. They need to work. Um, they ended up putting a store with grandpa's antique artifact, but they lost everything. They go into bankruptcy. That's when they met these two beautiful archaeologists, females, in a bar. They were drinking their frustrations away, and as they were talking with the girl, they were mentioning about all this antique stuff. And what's his name? Mark has a compass with a lot of ancient symbols that he had it with him at the time. So one of the girls, Jennifer and Sandy, they look at the symbols and they said, "Hey, these symbols, it looks like symbols from Peru." And they were talking about Paititi, and Luis said, "We have a map that our grandpa gave us." And they went to check the map, and it looks like, based on their archaeologist knowledge, they said, "This, I think this map is real, and they can lead us to the city of Peru." So when they were talking and discovering all this in the map and the compass and all these ancient symbols, something put their lives in danger. I don't want to say much, but that danger is what drives them to find themselves, or trying to do what they always wanted to do in life, is explorers of the ancients.
Hmm.
And that's when they, four of them, Andy, Sandy, Jennifer, Luis, and Mark, goes into this journey to find the city of Peru. It's a magical adventure type of story. And at the end of the day, is basically is the journey of finding something, but it's the journey of finding yourself, who you are. And sometimes in real life, danger or bad situation put us in a situation that we need to become better. And sometimes we found ourselves doing stuff that we never imagined to do, in the sense of, oh, I never thought I could do this. I'm stronger than what I think I am. I can do this. And it just gets you into a higher self level. That is basically about that journey of discovering through this fantasy story.
And it seems that you're a person that highly values friendship, Omar,
I
because
do.
I'm seeing those themes sort of
I do.
recur. Now, do you have a lot of lifelong friendships? Have you had that ability to keep people close to you like that?
That's the thing. I'm lucky enough. I know, as we grow older, I don't want to see how old I am, but as we grow older, life gets in. People gets married, have kids, and you lost contact. And sometimes you see a person every 2, 3 years, 4 years. But I've been lucky to have a bunch of friends very close to me that we grew up together. Some of them new friends that we just connected, and it's just that friendship, it makes you grow. I mean, there's a lot of people that say whatever you're surrounded with is whoever you become, something like that. A lot of these close friends with me, that they're trying to have all these many dreams, entrepreneurships, writers, or in the entertainment business, or other type of businesses. It makes me grow even more. And I'm always fascinated about that relationship between humans and two or three beings close to you. And I always those value those close relationships.
So, when is the book officially going to be out, and where will people be able to find it?
September 20th, we're gonna release it on San Diego Comic Con. I'm gonna do it as an Kindle edition, digital. I do gonna have a preview special printing. I may print it in the future, but right now, because of COVID and the supply chain, the paper is crazy expensive.
Yeah.
And as a comic book independent, if I print the graphic novel, I will need to sell it like for $50 just to make a little bit of profit. So nobody's gonna buy a $50 book to make profit for now. So Amazon Kindle, September 20th, next week, Wednesday, and it will be released at San Diego Comic Con. I'll make the announcement, and we have a preview special. So if you go to San Diego Comic Con, I'm gonna be at Small Press Area M05. So stop by, say hi, and pick a copy.
And how can people learn more about what you've already done and what you're doing? Where are you on social media? How can people reach out to you?
They can find me on Instagram at Moras himself or morasproduction.com. They can Google me, Omar Mora. Hopefully, stuff of the Inertians and Action Explorers pop up, and you can find me pretty easy. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and websites.
Do you have a few moments off the air for us, Omar?
What's that?
Do you have a few moments off the air for us?
Yeah, of course.
I want to thank you so much for being. This is always the fastest hour. Like, I feel like we just start talking and already like we've gone over an hour. I want to thank everyone who stopped by tonight. We had a couple people talking here in our chat room. I want to thank everyone who's going to be watching this in the near future. Definitely look out for Omar's book. We'll have links to it below the video, and any link you want to send our way, Omar, we'll be happy to let our audience know about that. Thank you so much. Everybody tune in next Thursday for Night Terrors Radio. Same time, same place. Thanks, everybody. Have yourself a great night.